It's another beautiful edition of Jurisprudential Tuesday, a program brought to you by the Faculty of Law, University of Uyo. This program aims at educating, informing, analyzing, and addressing burning issues from the legal perspective. I am Odinaka Chukwu Ihanacho, your host. Joining me to shed more light on this issue are 500 level law students of the Faculty of Law, University of Uyo, and they are also students of international law. We have David Samuel.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We also have the president of the Lawson Court of Appeal, Regina Jackson.
Thank you so much, Edinaka.
And we also have Fortune Enyinaya.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's get talking. David Samuel, could you tell me the rules that regulate wars? And when we talk about war, we are looking at international wars.
It's nice that you made a distinction between international wars and civil wars, right? So the laws regulating international wars on a global scale are called international humanitarian law. And these laws do not just exist in the vacuum. They are codified in the Geneva Conventions, the Rome Statutes, and also in customary international law. In the course of this program, I'm sure we'll get to shed more light on that.
Okay, thank you so very much. To Regina Jackson, what instruments, are responsible for punishing offenders of war crime?
The instruments that are responsible in punishing offenders of war crimes are the 4 Geneva Conventions. Additional to the 4 Geneva Conventions are the additional protocols. We also have the Rome Statute that makes provision for certain crimes, certain classes of crime, upon which punishments are also prescribed in these particular statute.
So does it mean that anything maybe that looks offensive could be called a crime?
Definitely no. The law that makes provision for crimes also define these crimes, so their extent to which a person's action can constitute a crime. And like I said, for instance, crime against humanity is defined in the Rome Statute. We look at Article 7 of the Rome Statute, we find out that a crime against humanity is clearly, or other crimes are clearly outlined in that particular article. More so too, the Geneva Convention prescribe certain actions that are not to be carried out during armed conflict. And when these acts are carried out during armed conflict, they are known to be in violation of that particular provisions of the law, and hence they constitute offense or criminal offense or war crime.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Fortune, have you or do we have scenarios where war crime offenders have been punished?
Absolutely. In fact, the birth of the Geneva Conventions in 1949 was predicated upon certain war crimes, committed by states. And of course, we know that statutes or conventions are not promulgated in a vacuum, as I said, right? These things are precipitated by certain cases. So of course, in the course of this discourse, we'll be able to look at certain cases that has, exemplified the operation of these statutes.
Okay, thank you so much, Fortune. Let me get back to you, David. Could you tell us specific cases where, crime offenders have been punished?
Okay, all right. So to exhaustively answer that question, we have to go back in time. So the first time that the international community came to prosecute war crimes were in the Nuremberg trials, right? That was when the German officials were arrested and tried, and most of them were convicted because of the activities they carried during the Second World War, which we now know as the Holocaust, right? And of course, these guys were tried, they were detained, and they were convicted. But after the International Criminal Court was established, we see cases such as the Thomas Lubanga case, and we also have German Katanga of the DRC, Congo. And there are a lot of ongoing investigations at the International Criminal Court up till now. So yes, but however, there's still a criticism that most of these cases are targeted at Africa. So we're hoping that this gets addressed. And I know currently there's an investigation into the Hamas and the Israel crisis. So yes.
So let us still stay with you. What are those processes for punishing war crime offenders? Because we know under criminal law in Nigeria, the police needs to get this person arrested. So is it the same under international law when it comes to crime?
So this is the argument where they say, is international law a toothless bulldog or not, right? So personally, from my research, I know that before, under International Criminal Court, there must be an investigation carried out by the prosecutor. That investigation can either be by way of recommendation, or maybe the prosecutor just finds out that, you're breaching a lot of crimes and they want the International Criminal Court wants to punish you. So that is the way of instituting matters through an investigation. And after the investigation is done, if you're found, guilty, you can now proceed with the trial. I know they use a hybrid system of both civil and common law at the international court. So yes.
Regina, when I started, I said that there were a series of coordinated incursions led by Hamas, from Gaza Strip into Gaza. Tell us, what crime has Hamas committed, and could it be classified as a crime under international law? Okay, thank you very much, Dinanka. The Israeli-Hamas war is already 61 days. And of course, when there is war, most of the time, combatants in the middle of this war are not really vested with the knowledge of the law. And so they carry out actions, conduct that contravenes the provisions of this law. And like I said earlier, that an act that contravenes the provisions of the law is a crime where the law says so. So in international law, actions like taking of hostages is a very reprehensible and vile act. And so such an act being carried out by the Hamas, I would like to call them terrorists. I know my brother here, David, who is a pro-Palestinian, you don't mind that. So the Hamas, which of course, like I said, I would like to call them terrorists, invaded Israel and took people, the Israelis, hostage. Now, additional Protocol 1 of the Geneva Convention prohibits taking of hostages. More so, the principle of distinction in international law clearly provides that there should be a distinction between the combatant and civilian. In other words, you shouldn't attack civilian or carry out any grievous harm against this set of persons. Why? Because they are not taking part in the war. Back to the issue of taking of hostages. When you take hostages, we do understand that international law protects humanity, and so any act that violates human rights contravenes the purpose of international law. And so taking of hostages does not only violate international law, it goes contrary to these persons' human rights. Therefore, it is a grievous act or grievous breach of both international law and international human rights law. So you're saying that Hamas has committed a war crime?
Of course, certainly. Also, there have been an allegation of rape going on, carried out by the Hamas terrorists. So certainly these are crimes that are outlined in the Rome Statute, and of course these are actions that the Geneva Convention prohibits. And so they amount to war crime.
Thank you so very much for that clarification. Fortune, how justifiable is it for civilians to be killed or used for defense while trying to neutralize terrorist attacks and groups?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'd like to clarify that when you use the word justify in law, I helplessly will look for an exception, because it is only an exception that will be the justification for that, right? So the question there is there any exception where in the event of war, civilians could be killed or bombed, hospitals could be killed, could be bombed and all that, right?
You know why I'm using the word justifiable? Because we've heard some of these combatants who saying that these other parts are using the civilians to defend themselves.
Okay, I like to say that because we are dealing with the law, right? So what is justifiable is what the law exempts, right? Now, in the light of that, I like to come from what my learning friend earlier stated. You know that the genocide of the 800,000 ladies in Rwanda, that case was one of the cases where rape was ruled as an instrument of war. So Article 8 of the Rome Statute has articulated very carefully and almost exhaustively acts that constitute war crimes, right? So until there is an exception in law where civilians could be bombed, and of course you can now bring in the principles of military necessity and the rest of them, right? So if we want to justify the killing of civilians by Israel, right, it has to be
Allegedly.
well, thank you very much. Allegedly, it has to be in the light of the law. And of course this issue becomes very complicated to have a position, and because even the ICC hasn't said that, I think they're still leading on investigations and all that. So no matter what Israel would say, and no matter what Hamas would say, or Gaza in that case, what is justifiable is what the law exempts. But I'd like to say that it is clearly a contravention of international humanitarian law to bomb a hospital at QC.
Since you brought up the issue of hospital, I actually wanted to ask that. So, bombing of medical facilities, and the forceful injections of residents in southern Gaza by Israeli forces, are they war crime?
Absolutely, they are war crimes. I had earlier stated that Article 8 is very exhaustive of what constitutes war crime, right? So there are serious violations, right, in the event of war that goes to the core essence of humanity. You have the principle of right to life. You have several principles that are even breached in this war. So the bombing of hospitals, the bombing of medical facilities, where there has not been a clear distinction between combatant and non-combatant, constitutes.
Okay, well, let me get to David. If you could expatiate this forceful injections of citizens or residents in southern Gaza.
We're familiar with 19th century European history. You know that, and Asian history, you will know that the land occupied by Israel now used to be dominated by the Arabs. So the Israelis moved after the Holocaust, like I established. But of course, you know that the Jews are some of the smartest people in the world. They use their technology. They became, although they are the minority, but due to the fact that they were so smart, so intelligent, they became the majority. Why? With the advent of technology and all of that. And to be, what would I say? The Arabs. They bullied the Arabs into, evacuating the land. So the way the map of Israel is structured in a way that the West...
Well, when you say bully, let's get you right. Could you expatiate it? Let
me expatiate on that. So there were a couple of wars that were fought between the Arabs in Israel and the Jews in Israel. Let's just say the Arabs were annihilated because you can't fight with the Jews, right? Like they have
with
the Israelites, yes. They have technological superiority and all of that. So the two wars that they fought, Israel won both of them. And of course, there are always repercussions of war. Spoils of war, plunder and all of that. And also one of the repercussions of that war was the encroachment of Jews, the Israelis, into Arab territory.
Okay, so then only you're talking about is the encroachment afterward by the Israelis into Arab territories.
Yes.
Okay, so go on in the forceful injection.
Yeah. So now what we are seeing in present-day Israel is the occupation of southern Gaza, like you said. So what happens is that they evacuate the Arabs forcefully from their lands, from their houses, from their livelihoods, and they build houses for the Israelites.
But don't you think this is a form of safety? Because if they keep bombarding Gaza, it's gonna cost millions of loss of life. And they are saying, okay, for safety reasons, move out from Gaza, from southern Gaza, right?
So I mean, if it was a safety precaution, you wouldn't tell your citizens to move into those places, right? So I mean, I don't think it's justified. So if you want to carry out a safety precaution, you tell people to move, and you barricade that land. You do not ask Jews to move there. So that's what is happening in southern Gaza right now. It is an evacuation of the Arabs and a replacement of the Arabs with Jews.
A replacement of the Arab with the Jews. So does that constitute a war crime? I'm directing it to you, David.
Yes, I can't remember the exact principle, but when there's like the occupying of a place forcefully and the rejection of those people, and sometimes even without notice. So yes, that's a war.
Oh, wow. So to Regina, the UN has said that it's collecting evidence of war crimes, between Israel and Hamas. I had this question: which court will determine this case? Because we know that ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel.
Certainly, when it has to do with international crimes or war crimes, like we said, it is the Rome Statute that makes provision for this crime. And under Article 1 of the Rome Statute, that article establishes the International Criminal Court. I think the issue of enforcement of international law has been one of the frailties of international law. And when we are talking about war crimes or punishing of offenders or people who engage in criminal activities in times of war, generally it is the International Criminal Court that has jurisdiction to determine issues of crimes committed during or in a course of war. So I think the debate about whether the international law, the International Criminal Court rather, will try Israel is based on the premise that Israel is not signatory to the Rome Statute. While Article 31 and 32 of the Vienna Convention clearly states that states are only bound by the treaties or by laws, international laws that they are signatory to. There are instances where a state can be bound or held responsible under a treaty that he or that the state is not signatory to. And in such cases, we say that a treaty applies ega omnes. But when it has to do with punishing of offenders in crime, of course, it's a very critical aspect because human life are involved, both the life of the offender and of course people that were victims of the crime. Whereas it is true that a state cannot be bound by laws that is not a party to, when it has to do with punishing of offenders under the International Criminal Court, a state may submit its sovereignty or jurisdiction may submit its sovereignty to the jurisdiction of the International criminals.
So are you saying that even if they are not signatory to maybe any treaty, that they could still, surrender themselves to the International Criminal Court? Then would the decisions be binding?
Certainly, once a state accepts the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, it's more like entering into an agreement, and then maybe we want to modify the terms of an agreement, and you're coming to me to say, can we use this corp as a seal? And that wasn't part of our agreement, but the fact that I have consented to it, any implication or any effect or consequences that comes as a result of my acceptance of what you asked me to do, I am to bear it. So the judgment or the decision of the International Criminal Court in respect of any state who submits or accepts the jurisdiction of the International Court binds such a state.
So, David Samuel, let me also ask you the same question. Considering the fact that ICC, has no police force and then its jurisdiction is not over Israel, what do you think about that? And also, what other legal instruments can be used to address these crimes?
So, in addition to what Regina has said, the ICC and Israel have a marriage of inconvenience, so to say. The United States did not sign and ratify the Rome Statute, so they are not bound by it. Israel as well did not ratify and sign the Rome Statute, so they are not bound by it. Prosecutions and investigations have been instituted against Israel. I remember in 2021, Fatou Bensouda, the then prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, had instituted an investigation against Israel. But the investigation kind of died down after the United States came out and criticized the International Criminal Court. Premising on what Regina had earlier established, that countries are all bound by treaties that they are not party to. So the International Criminal Court, prosecuting Israel, I think it's just like building sandcastles in the air, really. And I don't see Israel willfully submitting to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
Legal instruments, can be used in address.
So the major legal instrument that can be used is the United Nations Security Council. So we understand that the United Nations Security Council is the highest decision-making body of the United Nations, right? And most of their decisions are binding. But also at that level, did this really happen? Is it practicable? Let's deal with principles and pragmatics. By principle, they are meant to, punish Israel.
So when United Nations said that it's collecting evidence of war crimes, does that mean it will be submitted to the United Nations Security?
Yes, definitely. Matters of war and all of that are adjudicated by the United Nations Security Council. So like I was saying, in principle, the United Nations Security Council is meant to punish both the Hamas and Israel. But we see that even in the United Nations Security Council, there's a lot of geopolitics going on there. So you see that the United States, United Kingdom, and France are already allied towards Israel. Then you see that countries like China are allied towards Palestine. So, and you know that there's the veto power. One veto power overrides all. So we see a lot of politics there. So pragmatically, I don't see anything happening, to be honest.
You don't see anything happening. So, the second to the last question, Fortune, please, can citizens, file war crime cases in their own country? Because if ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel, then where else could one get a remedy?
Okay, to start with, the subject matter here is crime, war crime. So citizens do not file cases. You have the state investigate, right, and then prosecute. So I like to state emphatically that the law, I may not expressly state the article, right, but the law allows states to investigate crimes. And here we have the principle of territoriality, right? Crimes or actions that take place within their territory. And again, the principle of nationality. So where a crime has been committed within their territory or even outside their territory, but by a national, right? The law allows a state to investigate this crime and, of course, go ahead to prosecute. And I like to say that when ICC comes in at a point where the states do not do anything, or the states are almost powerless to do something, right?
This is in countries which ICC has.
Yes, absolutely. So you see the ICC wait to see if these states would investigate and, of course, go ahead to prosecute. So it therefore means that through the instruments of prosecution in the state, citizens can also ensure that things go well through the state, as I said.
But there have been this school of thoughts that if a crime is committed against a national in another country, he could file in his own country, and then every remedy would also go to.
Yeah, that's why I had earlier stated two principles: the principle of territoriality and the principle of nationality. These are the two major principles on which jurisdiction anchor, right? So where it could happen outside the territory of the state, but by virtue of the principle of nationality, the state could have jurisdiction.
Okay, so as we round up, I would love you all to give us your advice, a piece of advice to Israel and Hamas. I'll start with you, Fortune.
My advice: if only this issue would get to Israel or Hamas, so to say.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't if I would come from a legal standpoint or from the standpoint of morality. But then again, whoever sees this video would want to hear me say they should cease war and cease fire, because lives are being lost, properties are being destroyed. And like David said, let's be practical here. The instrument of the law sometimes may not help, right?
So what will help if the law doesn't help?
It could be an agreement. It could be, let's negotiate, let's negotiate. You know that, yes, earlier there had been a truce between both parties. It was because Hamas had refused to release the women they held in hostage. That's why after the 1 week break, they still went back, right? So it therefore means if that truce had succeeded to some extent, it means that if there is a proper agreement between both parties, the war could come to an end.
So even Samuel.
So my advice to Israel, and let me not use Hamas, let me use Palestine. So first off, the Hamas should give the authority or the sovereignty they have in Gaza to the Palestine Authority. Hamas is a terrorist group, to be honest. Yes, the terrorist group, to be honest.
But that's what it is, because even internationally it's called a militant group. Certainly, yeah.
I mean, they have been labeled terrorist group by the United Nations, right? So if Hamas is still in authority over Gaza, there's no legitimacy there. Meanwhile, there's a Palestine Authority that is even doing well in the West Bank. So first, Hamas needs to give power to the Palestinian Authority. After that, men can now put pressure on Israel and Palestine to pursue a two-state solution. That will be the end to all of this, because as far as Israel and Palestine are still submerged under the nation of Israel, what is still going to happen is Israel is still going to battle for supremacy. Gaza and the West Bank want emancipation, and we are having this cycle all over again. I mean, it's not today, it's not 61 days ago that the war started. It started a lot of years back.
So David, you're foreseeing a two-stage solution.
That's the best solution.
So Regina Jackson, your parting words.
I would like to say this as my parting words. We do know that conflict is ubiquitous to human, and when it has to do with states and state sovereignty, territorial issues have been the crux of armed conflict in states. But then, I'm saying this because we are bound to see this every day. There will be conflict. If people don't resort to amicable way of resolving them, they have to be war. But then, while we are engaging in this war, I think we have to fight them in a way that we ensure the existence of humanity after the war. even during the war. So my advice is, in as much as Israel and the Hamas are going headlocks on achieving their goals through violent means, they should ensure that the vulnerable people, like the children and the women, and even non-combatants generally, should be exempted from their atrocities. Because what is going on in Gaza is actually a genocide. Undeniably, it is a genocide, because the destruction of civilian objects. During the times of war, we should be able to differentiate between what to destroy and who to destroy. This is what entails the principle of military objective and civilian objects.
Thank you so much. This is what differentiates between the principles of military objective and civilian object. I want to thank each and every one of you here, from David Samuel, Regina Jackson, the President of the Court of Appeal, and Fortune and Enin Naya, for making it to today's edition of Jurisprudential Tuesday. This is where we call it a wrap. A special thanks to all those who made today's program a success, from Big Z Benson to Ethiop Media, Emmanuel Richard, the members of the faculty media, and the executive producer of this program, Professor Mojisola, saying the Dean Faculty of Law, University of Rio. I am Odinaka Chukwu Ihianacho. Till when next we meet, make sure everything you do remains legal. So I say bye.